On this episode of Walk a Mile in Their Shoes, we are located at Liberty Park in Salt Lake City, Utah. And our guest today will be Brenda Alley.
Hi, my name is Brenda. I am a social worker. I have been doing social work in Salt Lake Valley for about 30 years. I've been doing 22 years in the schools, and before that I worked at the U in the Teen Mom Clinic. Actually, that's where I got my start, and I started because I was a teen mom myself. Now I'm a little bit older. Like I said, I've been in the school with Jared I've been working for 22 years there. I have 4 kids who I like to hang out with. My kids, my grandkids, I like to read, I like to hang out with my dogs. I like to go on hikes. I love Liberty Park. I used to live up the road, so this is one of my favorite places. So come on and walk a mile in my shoes.
Hi, Brenda.
Hey, how are you, Jared?
Good. Thanks for coming out.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm not very familiar with this place, but it sounds like you are.
Yeah, I used to come here all the time and go rollerblading. So
yeah?
I love Liberty Park.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, you're going to kind of lead the way then.
Okay.
So I'm going to set our little odometer here just so we have a way to track our progress. We're going to walk a little mile.
Okay.
It's a beautiful park here.
It is. It's actually pretty cool too for 90-something degrees today.
Yeah, that feels great.
That's nice. Yeah.
It feels really good.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
You've been a social worker for a long time now, about 22 years, I believe.
22 just in Granite School District.
Yeah, just in the Granite School District. What led you to that line of work?
So, like I was saying in my introduction, I got pregnant in high school, so I was a teen mom. When I came up to go to the U, there was a teen mom clinic at the University of Utah.
Yeah.
And so I went up there. I volunteered at first, and then I got a job. Initially just as a clerk, and then I became what they called a vocational counselor, which was I worked with kids with getting them into school, making sure they stayed into school. Okay. And I always worked under a social worker. And I started to see some of what she did, and I liked it. I always wanted to do it. And so after I'd been there about 10 years, I decided, I've met a couple of social workers. I want to give it a try. So I applied. And that's really where my desire to be a social worker, not a teen mom, a social worker started, was at the Teen Mom Clinic.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you learned kind of from some really challenging experiences, and that's kind of what led you to want to sort of pay it forward, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think I realized with teen moms, you can get in a hard life space and things can be rough. It is different than mental health.
Yeah.
And so when I came to the schools and I was working with just your average everyday, sophomore, junior, I realized that there are kids that may not have as hard of a life situation, but they do have struggles with mental health issues.
Yeah.
And then there's people that maybe just have struggles with, the situation that they're in. So they can be two different things, and that was a kind of eye-opening for me.
Yeah, right. Okay. I'm glad you bring that up, because you've mainly been working in high schools for a majority of your time as a social worker, right?
Yeah, with teens.
Yeah. Okay. So, a question that I get asked a lot that I'm going to ask you is, what are some of the biggest issues or concerns that the youth and teenagers that you see are facing today?
There's a lot more awareness right now of mental health issues, which is nice. There's not as much of a stigma still. But I do see sometimes there's such an awareness that sometimes people assume that they have something maybe that they don't have, maybe they're struggling in their life and they think they're depressed. But I do think a lot of what kids are struggling with today is there is a lot of anxiety. A lot of kids have a lot of anxiety, not like when I went to school, or maybe even when you went to school. Like I've been there 22 years, and I definitely in the last 12 to 15 years I've seen a lot more kids with anxiety and real can be kind of debilitating anxiety too, which is hard. And then I still think there is that, even though there's not as much stigma around mental health as there used to be, I really do think that it's still difficult, to explain mental health issues to parents and convince parents sometimes that kids do need a little bit more help with their mental health issues.
Yeah, right. So anxiety and just almost being more aware of mental health has been somewhat of a challenge, it sounds like.
It can be sometimes, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of a positive thing, but sometimes a challenging thing
Well,
too.
so yeah, sometimes I have to explain, no, you're not having anxiety right now. You're not prepared for this test and you're freaking out.
Yes.
And that is not you. That's normal. That's a normal reaction to not preparing for a test. It's not necessarily anxiety,
Right.
I had to have that conversation about 3 weeks ago with a kid.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, I didn't prepare for this test, so I've had anxiety. I'm like, well, yeah, that's called not being prepared. That's going into some place and being worried because you're not prepared, but that's not necessarily the definition of anxiety. So, yeah.
Good point. I like that. You brought up like working with parents too. And that's always an interesting point because there's always kind of a generation gap. Like people seem to think, people seem to say, the current generation or the kids today, they're soft, or they have it easy.
Or this is all social media. If they would just not be on social media, they won't be depressed.
So there's kind of that generation gap where, because they grew up differently than we did or our parents did, that they're seen as almost like lesser. How much of that do you agree with or disagree with exactly?
I do think that some social media can be harmful because kids do bully each other, and sometimes you look at social media and you think people are doing so much better and having so much fun, and you're not. So I do think there is some negatives to social media, but I know a lot of parents think their kids are on the phone or on their social media and that's the cause of their depression or anxiety, and that's not true. And so it's sometimes hard to explain to parents, this isn't just about them putting their phone down. This isn't just about growing pains or, they've had these feelings, they've been anxious, they've been depressed for, a significant amount of time, and this isn't in the normal realm anymore. So it is a hard one. It is hard because parents and kids never see it the same way. So if you have a parent sometimes that thinks their kids have mental health issues, sometimes the kids are like, no, I don't. And then you've got kids that are like, I'm really struggling. I wish I could go to see a counselor. And the parents are like, no, this is just normal growing pains. So it can be really difficult to kind of get both people on the same page. So it's a tough balance. It really is. And there's that normal part of parents and teens struggle. They just do. It's normal development for them to argue and not see things the same, and not for things to be horrible and chaotic, but just to sometimes not be on the same page. Right. It's tough.
Well, as you've worked with youth extensively, kind of along what we're talking about, what does give you a lot of hope for the coming generations when it comes to mental health?
I think that kids are, like I said, very aware of mental health. And kids that have mental health, a lot of times they'll say, I hate being depressed. I hate having anxiety. And I always say, yeah, it sucks. It does suck, But I really do think the kids that have issues with depression and anxiety, they have so much empathy for someone else in their same situation. They understand, or they try to understand what other people are going through. And it makes them so compassionate and caring.
Yeah.
And, you know, you and I see kids that are in crisis, but then they bring their friends in. When they see friends that are in crisis, they bring them in, or they say, hey, so-and-so's really struggling. And so they're aware and they have that ability to seek help for themselves and to help their friends seek help. So I think that's one of the good things that I see, and just the stigma of mental health and suicide and that kind of stuff, just there, it's still there, but it's not there like it used to be. And people are more accepting and understanding of mental health concerns and issues. And I feel like that's a very positive thing that this generation is bringing to the table.
You know, you and I did not collaborate whatsoever on that question beforehand, but I would probably almost word for word agree with you.
You say the same thing, yeah.
Just that level of empathy that they have is so nice and good to see, you know, from just a group of kids, and they care about each other, and they just want each other to be well. To be well. And it's also nice. I've got kids that have struggled and then have gone to therapy and they're doing really good. And they can recognize that someone else isn't. And they also can recognize that they're not healthy enough to help that other person. And they'll come and say, hey, this is going on with this kid. I can't be there for him like I should because it's triggering my thoughts. But could you see them? Yeah.
And so it's also nice to see kids that are coming out of, you know, like they've gotten help and they feel better and they have more skills and they're able to address someone else's concerns and theirs at the same time. I'm always impressed with that.
Yeah, agreed. I love that about the kids that we serve. So I want to switch gears a little bit because, you know, the work that you do is so intense. And
can be.
Very taxing. What do you do to kind of deal with your own day-to-day mental health and preventing burnout and just kind of some of those little day-to-day things that you do to help yourself stay healthy?
So I think from doing this for, you know, I really started doing some sort of social work when I was about 23. I used to work at Head Start. That was one of my jobs I had when I had my bachelor's. And I've heard some really pretty crazy stories. I've worked with some kids that have gone through some pretty severe tragedies, but this last couple years at our job at Hunter has been, should we flip this way?
Your call.
Okay, let's go around. Has probably been the most taxing to me. And I don't think I realized how, because I had just always been, you know, like you try to exercise, you try to, you know, journal, you try to take time for yourself and do things that help you feel better. And I feel like the last couple years that it wasn't enough anymore. And I got to a point where we had a training where they started talking about like a tragedy happening at a school, and I really had a panic attack in there, like a flashback almost. And I'm like, okay, I'm not doing well with my own caretaker, you know, grief, and so I think counseling is good. I've gone to see a counselor, and I didn't realize, like when I was talking to him and we were talking about work, and I'm like, you know, we've had all of this stuff happen. We've had these tragedies, these deaths. And he was like, oh my gosh, how do you manage that? And I'm like, well, right now I don't think I am. You know what I mean? So, and I'm like, I'm exercising, I'm eating healthy, you know, like I'm journaling, I'm talking to people, and I still feel like crap. And so now I need to bring it to a different level, you know? So I think sometimes we're just not aware of how the situation is affecting us. So even if we're doing, because like I said, I felt like I had a pretty good, you know, self-care beforehand. And then sometimes it just hits you anyway. And you're just like, okay, I'm I'm not in a great place right now. I need to get help myself. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's important. And to be able to realize that as a therapist helps you when you're, dealing with someone that's, you're like, yeah, we all need help. Everyone does, No one is perfect.
Yeah.
Even the person that you're talking to needs help. So, yeah.
That is something that's important, that people like you and me, we are human, we feel, we cry, and we need help. We need help from a counselor or a therapist sometimes too.
Yep.
And so I love that you were willing to share that. Kind of, and you may have already alluded to this based on what you've said already, but I'm curious, when I do these types of interviews, I like to find out something that just a really a time where your mental health was severely taxed or tested, where you really needed to really dig deep and work yourself through that. Is there a time that you're willing to share?
Well, and there's the one time I was telling you about, but beforehand, I've got 4 kids.
Yeah.
So I had 3 boys. I had my first son young, and I did okay. I had twins, and I did okay. And then I had my daughter a year and a half after the twins.
Wow.
And she was not, she came pretty fast after they did. And I realized probably when she was about 2 or 3 weeks old that I wasn't bouncing back like I should. I never really had the baby blues per se with my other pregnancies, but with her, I was like, I'm crying all the time. Like, I love her, and I'm super happy she's here, and I'm enjoying parenting her, but I'm a mess. Yeah. So I talked to my doctor, and at that point in time, they put me on medication. I was on medication for a couple years, and then, got off. So I tell kids that too. I'm like, it can be tough, but sometimes we just have to say, I'm not okay right now. And I remember I felt so bad, and I just cried all the time, and nothing made me feel good, and I could look at my daughter, my kids, and love them and be happy that they were there, but still, like, inside I just felt miserable. I was so miserable. And so when I started taking medication, I felt better. I'm like, when kids will tell me how they feel, I'm like, I'm sorry, because no one deserves to feel awful all of the time. We all feel awful occasionally. But if you're stuck in, oh my gosh, I feel like crap all the time and nothing makes me feel better, then it's time to get help. And it can be therapy, it can be medication, it can be both, and at one time in your life, like when I had postpartum depression, it was definitely I need medication. It's a chemical imbalance. And then now, I feel like it was like work trauma that I have to talk through.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't, because something worked for you before or didn't work before, doesn't mean it's going to work or not work now.
Yeah.
So sometimes in your life you may need something, and other times it may be something else.
Yeah. I'm grateful that you were willing to share that, because that happens all the time. And like you said before, a lot of aspects of mental health are becoming destigmatized. And when we talk about things like postpartum depression, hopefully that's becoming a little less destigmatized.
I feel like people know about it more, but it really is hard to be like I was married and I had, kids, and I had wanted to have kids, and I was so happy to finally get a daughter, and to be able to say, I'm happy with all that, but I still feel like crap.
Yeah.
And it's hard, because you're as a new mom, everyone expects you to be happy. And I was, I was satisfied, I guess I should say, but I never felt happy. I always was sad. I always felt awful. And I'm like, this isn't normal. And I'm not popping out of it like you would if it was just the baby blues. This is something more. So it's hard, and I didn't talk about it with people at the time. It's only been since, I started working more with social work and getting to I don't tell most kids that story,
Mm-hmm.
but every once in a while I'll have some kid that's really resistant to getting help and really feels awful. And I'll just say, you know what, I get it. I didn't want to tell people either.
Yeah.
But you can feel better. You don't have to feel like this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes it can be, you know, you go talk to someone, you can feel better pretty fast. Or you get on medication, you can feel better, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important to remember.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of people out there who need to hear just what you said. So thank you. You know, believe it or not, we're just about done with our mile here.
I talk a lot. I was worried that I could talk for 2 hours. And
that is a good thing in this case.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up this walk here, I think it's really important to address sort of maybe that one person, so to speak, who might be watching this, who is really struggling and who really needs something to keep going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you address that person and provide some words for that person right now?
I think sometimes it can be hard to tell your parents or your significant other, I'm struggling, I'm not okay. But there are people that you can tell. You know, if you're a high school kid, obviously there's counselors and social workers at most schools, all schools, I would hope.
Mm-hmm.
If you're older, you know, your doctor or a friend that has the ability to say, okay, you need a little bit more than what you're doing, and to seek help, you know, and sometimes help doesn't come as fast or as easy as you maybe hoped, but you just still keep trying, and just realize that no one deserves to live in a state where they feel miserable all the time and where they can't have any joy, or they're so anxious they can't do the things that they love. And I think one thing that I think helps all of us just feel better in general are our friends. That doesn't mean, kids, that your friend is your therapist, but, you know, like being around your people, having, you know, important people, important coworkers, and being around your family and those people that support you are important. And if just that isn't working anymore, then just realize you may need something else, and just ask people for help. Ask your parents, ask your doctor, ask a counselor at work, or at school, sorry. And
or work.
Yeah, at work. And just reach out. And if the first person doesn't react in the way that you want, then ask someone else. And, you know, because it's not worth, like I said, it's just not worth feeling bad and being sad and anxious if you don't have to be. It's an awful place to be. So get some help.
Yeah, there's always help on the way.
There's always help.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's always people out there that can point you in the right direction. Kids, you know, if you can talk to your parents, great. If you can't, oh, cute dog. If you can't, there's always other adults that you can reach out to at your school or in your family. I even have kids reach out to like older siblings and say, okay, if you've got a good relationship with your sibling and they can help you talk to your parents, or they can help, you know, you get help, then you find who your people are and who your support system is, and you have them help you, because we all need it sometimes.
Yeah.
You know?
I think we all do, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
And community is important. You know, your family and your friends and your people are important. They're important to your mental health, and they are, you don't want them to be your therapist, but they can be supportive and help you get help from the appropriate people.
Yes.
When you're ready.
Yeah. Right.
Or when you know it's time.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we hit a mile.
Yeah. And it wasn't even, I didn't even get super hot. I thought we would be so hot. So,
no, that's
right.
it. Well, Brenda, I appreciate you taking this time today. And thanks for letting us walk a mile in your shoes today.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. We'll see ya.